One. So recently I was on a podcast and I've actually been asked this question, I think in real life, maybe in conversation, but I know that I was asked this recently on a podcast, kind of talking about how, over the last 6, 7 years of having this business, developing our company is called Sex and Love Co. My brand, obviously, That Sex Chick, this podcast, That Sex Chick. And the name That Sex Chick just kind of came to me as like someone who is a sex educator, navigating parties and events and workshops and things, and people introducing me as, oh, have you met Alexa? She's that sex chick. And so I just took it and made it my handle and put it on things and then just kind of ran with it. But recently I've been asked, since, my husband and I are on our parenting journey, at the point of this recording, let's see, where am I at? 17, almost 18 weeks. And this is baby number one, little boy. So we're very excited. This is very much on purpose. And it's also fucking terrifying. I've been asked recently, so what's going to happen to that sex chick when you become a mom? Maybe nothing, maybe something, like, will you still be that sex chick when you have kids? I'm like, what do you mean? And they're like, well, when you have kids that understand what that means, how does that change? And so that's been, at first when I got that question, I'm like, I don't know. At this point, I don't see any of it really changing that much, though I see, my personal identity. I see aspects of like who I will be as a mother. Like I see myself changing. I don't know what that looks like, but I see myself changing, my identity changing, but I don't see my work changing. And I understand the curiosity that people have. And I'm like, maybe just when they're toddlers, I'll have to put all of the dildos and vibrators that are in my office on a higher shelf. but I don't see any of the erotic art. I don't see any of those things coming down. I don't see conversation changing. I don't see, our work changing or anything like that. But it does make me very curious. And so having you, Candice, on the show today, I am very excited because I get to ask you how that has all translated in not only in your marriage, but of course you as a mom and having kids, and what it's like what it's been like to devote your life to, essentially the overarching theme, and you can correct me if I'm wrong here, is healing in a lot of ways, and then also supporting yourself on the journey of your purpose work. And it's, like how that process has unfolded for you, and then the transition into motherhood, and how that, communicating that to your little people, and like and making sure that they feel confident and they feel cared for and they feel, understanding, and, however age appropriate understanding they can register, and what life looks like when you choose to have the history that you have, and even the future that you and your husband have created for yourself. So I'll stop babbling now, Candice. I would love to hear, your take on that, your insights on that. And then if you would, kind of maybe weave in your story in there a bit so that our listeners can get a good feel for who you are and what you do in the world.
Well, first of all, congratulations. What an exciting journey that you are partaking on. I think motherhood it's like the most magical and like the best thing. Like I get emotional just talking about it. It's just like the best thing I've ever done, and I just feel so blessed that that was a possibility for me, because I was told by so many specialists I wasn't going to have kids. I just was told 0% chance. And I had some, like, I was doing full blood panels, like quarterly, checking on things, taking at one point progesterone to try to get my hormones up. So like I had so many people working on it, and they just said it wasn't in the stars for me. So yeah, I feel blessed every single like day that I get to see my children and have that as a part of my reality. And I think with that, when I made my decision to get into adult work, not thinking I was going to have kids made it a little bit easier, because you're not thinking about repercussions of that. What's that going to be like for them? I mean, they weren't part of the equation because I was told I couldn't. So navigating being kind of like a public figure and being like, I guess, like working off like in the sex space for so long, obviously that's going to come with some baggage, some judgment, um some, like side effects, if you will. And I don't regret any of it. I think it's so sad that our first question is to expecting moms is, are you still going to like be that sex chick? Are you going to have to put away that side of you, that piece of you? Are you going to have to completely abandon pleasure? Are you going to have to hide the art that you find like, brings out your curiosity and your interest and is like authentic to you? I think you owe it to your children to keep that side of you alive, whether you're having a boy or a girl. So if you're having a boy, it's like, what do you want for him in a union, in a relationship? Do you want his, if he has a wife down the road, do you want her to be fulfilled and to, like, I don't know, sacrifice a piece of herself because we're told that that's coupled with shame? Or do you want him to have like a full life and a full relationship with someone? And if you're having a daughter, do you want her to have to give that up because she's a mom? Like, can't we have both of those things at the same time? And I think we've gotten into this place where in womanhood, we have these different phases and we're not supposed to take them along the way with us. We're supposed to discard them. And I think that that is fundamentally flawed. You're supposed to be this holistic person. And with that, you have your curiosity of your youth, and then you have that nurturing from your motherhood, and then you have the wisdom that comes with age, and you have that sensuality and that magnetism that hopefully stays with you the whole time. I don't want to lose that just because I turned 60. I mean, you see older women that are just fully in themselves and have total confidence and like no apologies given. Like they are just authentically them, and they're not going to, discard them because society says so. So I think leading by example is huge when it comes to how do you want your kids to see the world, see themselves. Is there original sin? Are they born into this world bad, or are you born into this world beautiful and divine? You get to decide that narrative in their head, and it's leading by example. So if I start approaching, sexuality or pleasure, and not pleasure in the sense of like necessarily sexually charged, just pleasure, like full enjoyment, joy, right? Like taking all of life, all of the energy that life has for you. And if I approach that with a ton of trepidation and caution and concern about other people's judgments, then that's what I'm modeling for my kid. And I don't want that. I want them to be themselves, to be authentic, to like go after life, to question things, to be curious, not to lead with conclusions, So I guess the long-winded answer is just modeling it and not being so eager to discard pieces of yourself because of potential approval.
Mm. I love that so much. And that's basically what I've been thinking, whenever I don't know what's appropriate yet, like to say and think and feel. And because in my mind, and I don't know if I've said this on the show or not, but in my mind, when I think of our future son, and I think of him like coming into his sexual, like curiosities and being a teenager and starting to date whoever he chooses to date and what that feels like. And my hope is like that I've helped participate in building his confidence and his self-esteem while also helping him to stay grounded and to understand, ego and all of that. And knowing that like a teenager's a teenager and they're going to do what a teenager does.
Mhm.
And I'm like, in my mind, I have these grandiose plans of of the way that he dates and like how he cares for people and how he, goes for his pleasure, but not in a taking kind of way. And where he's
Mhm.
also focused on pleasure for others. And, in my head, I'm just like, my future son fucks. Like you want your kid to interact with mine. Like, he understands consent and he understands boundaries and he understands that, like leaning into those things and having discussions, and he can have those discussions, and I have these grandiose plans where I'm like, and he's going to be able to tell me all these things. And like other parents of teenagers are like, good luck with that. But that's at least like the vision that I have for, because we're at number one now. So it's hard to envision the rest of the gaggle we might have in the next handful of years. But my dream would be that all of my kids, but I hear the general collective teenager mom, like, no, we don't talk about that, and I know in my friend group, I am the designated, like, kind of kooky aunt that knows all the sex stuff. And so all of my friends that have like anywhere from 1 to 3 year olds right now are like, I feel better having you as a friend, as an auntie to my kids, because I don't have to worry about, being the one that they come to and sweating out these conversations. I'll just send them to you. I'm like, that's great. And your kids will probably feel really great. Maybe, if I like play it cool, they'll feel really great. But who do my kids go to if they're like, no, mom, no, we can't come to you, you know?
Well, so first, isn't it interesting though, like when you have parents that are further along the path than you, a lot of times they lead with like negativity or skepticism, or like it's very dismissive right away. It like, good luck with that, or
Mm-hmm.
you know what I mean? Why is that there? Right. So
Totally.
if that's already where your neutral is, then I'm going to assume that our parenting styles are probably different and the way that we approach conversations is different. So your story and your journey through parenthood isn't necessarily going to be mine. And I like try to stop that immediately if I have people that give me bad advice and or just like negative advice, and you just see kind of how they see their life, and it's pretty sad from my perspective. I go on these mom dates, and the entire time, like, I just want to gouge my eyes out. Like, they're complaining about their kid for an hour and a half, and I get it. There's hard days, like, for sure. Like, you're tapping into energy reserves, especially in the beginning. You're sleep deprived, you're trying to heal. Like, it's a lot, but what is complaining doing about it? I think it's like kind of it's perpetuating like that negative neurochemistry in your brain, and you're like, okay, well, this is what we're going to do, and I'm just going to continue to see all of the lows, and then when you're stuck there, you can't appreciate anything, you can't have gratitude for anything. And then like you see the discomfort when it comes to having those sexual conversations with your kid. They're like, "Oh, you'll just do it." Why? Like, you owe it to your kid to do hard things, to say, "I can do hard things, and I'm going to get over my own fear, my own bullshit, and I'm going to do what's important, and that's to have these conversations with you because you are my children." And it's different to say like they can't have other resources outside of you. Of
Right.
course they need those, but they also need to feel like they can come to you with anything, and it is your responsibility to kind of like get rid of that shame and that fear, because if you're leading with that and like that avoidance, of course they're going to feel that, because for a long time they say like the kids look at mom and dad like they're God, like that is God. So when you get mad at them, it's like God getting mad at them, and when you like project shame onto them, that's like God saying that's shame. So it's like an energetic thing. So you don't need to overtly say anything, but if you're avoiding these things, then they're going to automatically think, well, okay, well, mom's kind of acting like weird about this subject. Maybe I should feel weird about this subject. So like get over your own bullshit. You owe it to your kids. Because again, like that inner dialogue that they have for the rest of their life is going to be either mom or dad, mom or dad, mom or
Yeah.
dad. And eventually they're going to confuse that for their own stuff. So age appropriate conversations, I mean, we started having the body part conversation and like full like actual terminology with our kid around 2. And a big deal with this is if a predator approaches them, like a sexual predator approaches them, and they have the verbiage, like they can say penis, they can say vulva, they have the words for this, they are so much less likely to be a victim of sexual violence or predation, because the predator can say, oh, this kid and this family, he or she is comfortable going to like authority figures, that like they're comfortable with this verbiage. If I do something, they're going to be able to express that. Or if you have someone that has like these pet names for everything or whatever, they're like, oh, that family doesn't really talk about this is a good kid to go after. So I mean, even from that point of view, it's like just a necessity to start having those conversations really, really young. And like those numbers are astonishing. So like I'm sure all the moms have done their Googling. It's terrifying. So you want to equip your child with the proper tools. So starting with like naming things what they're actually named is really like a good stepping stone into that conversation. And then working with consent, we talk about respect my no. And then my toddler has totally turned that around, because I'll like say you need to eat this thing, and he's like, respect my no. I'm like, that's not how this applies. But yeah, you can teach a lot of these things that we think are really heavy, or maybe they're not ready for at a really young age. You just have to do it in creative ways, and they pick it up. So yeah, again, like you owe it to
Yeah.
yourself and just do the work.
Totally, totally. And I think with my friends, and I have an amazing group of friends, and I think that what they mean is that if it doesn't get all the way through,
Hmm.
at least I have you. And as you're talking, when I want to gouge your eyes out with mom dates and all of that, I think that sometimes they might find peace in the commiseration versus doing the actual hard work, which is coming to resolution in themselves so that they're not projecting this stuff onto the people around them, including their children.
Hmm.
So big work. It's like if we want to have that healthy, happy, well integrated, well rounded kind of family, then it's the journey within, for the parents. So, anyway, thank you for all that reflection. Of course, this is something that I'm curious about now at 34, and have never really been all that curious outside of helping adults get sex education. That way they can then translate that into their home environments. It's basically all that I've been interested in up until going to become mom myself. And you mentioned as a part of your story that you were told that you couldn't have children. And so you made decisions for your life, and in your business and your work and all of that without, you know, in some ways I would say it sounds like considering that they were coming. And so what did that look like? What was your journey? Cause I definitely, cause I have like a whole other little list of questions that I'm like really curious about. But before I just go straight to them, the people want to know where are you coming from? And what did it look like getting into sex education, and I know your version of sex education might be different than what I'm talking about as far as my version of sex education, just getting into the sex industry space. I guess I can use that term at large. And then, towards probably the end of our conversation, I have some personal questions about content and about being a creator, because I'm currently recording this podcast while my Instagram is in jail for
I
the
saw
third
that
time.
today.
I
Yeah.
am very sad about it. I have an amazing community of people and about 70,000 followers on the platform. And that's like my main way to communicate with the majority. I mean, of course, we have our email list and we've got our other platforms, but like that's my one that I interact with the most. And it is felt, and my content is like super PG. And so we can talk about that, a little bit later in the show.
No, I'd love to for sure. Yeah, I saw that and I was like, I bet you that that account's in jail right now, which is exactly what is the
Yeah.
case.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I think like a lot of people, I had a lot of shame and resistance when it came to sex, sexuality, pleasure. I I thought that, my purity was something to hold on to, and that was my entire identity. And once I gave it away, I was no longer the same, no longer as valuable. It was like this thing I could never get back. It was almost like that was the commitment. And so I lost my virginity to like a long-term boyfriend and was planning on marrying him. I think a lot because of that thing that I gave away, like that thing I was not going to get back. I put so much value in that. And I feel like when I got the news of being infertile, that kind of created a huge rift in the relationship because he wanted kids. And he started acting totally different, and it caused our breakup, which was such a blessing, but at the time it was devastating. And I moved down south with him, so I was essentially by myself now. I had no friends, no family, nothing. And I took it as an opportunity to like discover who I was and what I wanted out of life, and to reconnect with that sexuality and that sensuality, and what was that? Like, what did I want my relationship to that to be? And for some reason, I felt the most comfortable exploring that through content creation. And I had always idolized like these goddesses like Tara Patrick and Pamela Anderson and Carmen Electra. And
Mm-hmm.
I just saw the world would gravitate around them. They would go into a room, right? Or they would do an interview and everyone was just like, who is that? What is her story? What does she have? And I saw it, and this was just naturally my mindset. I was like, how do I get some of that? I didn't see them as like competition, or they took something and automatically projecting insecurities onto them. I was like, no, if they figured something out, I can figure something out. So I don't know what that looks like, but I know that they were all in the industry on some level, right? So I started with webcamming, was not my jam. I don't like being told what to do, and that is essentially all you're doing the entire time you're online is getting bossed around by people. So that was not for me. And I knew I wanted to do the films, so I reached out to a couple companies that I had really liked their work. I liked their talent, and I was just like, how do I get in? How do I sign up? Where's my audition? Like, don't audition. That's not a thing. But like, send us your ID, prove you're 18, yada, yada. They flew me down to Miami, and it was quickly one of the highest watched and rated scenes to date. And they just from there, it was history. I was just kind of getting booked. I was contracted to a couple big companies for a while. I ended up leaving because I think the way that content creation going now is getting more decentralized. Power is going more to the performers, to the content creators. I think this is across all media, not just adult. And I think that's a very beautiful and important thing because there was like too much power that was condensed within the companies and like within the industry. It's very much a monopoly. So I think, third party platforms like OnlyFans is more than necessary for content creators. So yeah, I left, started doing my own thing, did the podcast. Yeah, and now I have an agency where we're kind of like helping adult creators redefine like their value, prepare for the future, like when they're done shooting, what does that look like? Help them diversify. Sometimes we have to get accounts back for people. So yeah, it's just being like the example of what I wish was in the industry back when I was shooting.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, that's big. And, I've had someone come on to the show. It's probably been a couple months or so. And it was one of the most illuminating conversations because it's someone who is an active sex worker who goes and works at the ranch in Nevada.
Hmm.
I don't know, maybe once a month for like a weekend and then comes back and does her like artistic theater whatever life that she does. But she was, it was so amazing to hear a story from someone that is like, I love this, I chose this, I love this is great for my life and all that. Because I think so many people, and then hearing your story, it's like so many people consider, okay, so someone who's in the adult industry who is a performer who makes porn or creates content or whatever the thing is, there's like the vast majority of people, it's like immediate shame is put on the person, or like, you poor thing is put on the person. And it's almost never looked at it like, and not that it's never, but it's almost never, I would say, looked at it like, oh, you're so empowered.
Hmm.
Look at you choosing to do with your life what you want to do with your life in the way that you want to do it. It's like immediate, usually from some people, it's like, oh, like immediate judgment and projection from someone that's like maybe challenged by their own sexuality or lack of expression, or challenged by, oh, but my husband is in my, is affected by this industry and whatever the deep dark ways are, or whatever the thing is. And then if it's not that, then more often than not, it's like, oh, you poor thing. Do you need to be saved? Do you
Hmm.
need to be helped? And so to hear someone say like, this was something that I chose for myself and I was really excited about it and I was intrigued. And then you go into it and you realize, okay, webcamming, not for me. Let me go over there. Okay, cool. All right. Wow. The industry is changing. Let me go in this direction. Where did it lead you
So
ultimately?
yeah, so ultimately it led me to have like the most free life that I could have ever dreamt up. I mean, I basically have all of the perks of being a stay-at-home mom. I podcast a couple times a week.
Mhm.
I focus a little bit on my accounts, but I'm mostly focused on the agency right now,
Yeah.
which is helping up and coming talent and help them to like not fall into like the traps that I did in the very beginning, because you think everyone kind of has your back. It's all, you don't have a lot of people to talk to. So when you're in the industry, you kind of get sucked in because who else are you going to talk to about your hard days or whatever is coming up for you at work? Because there's so much judgment and if it's not judgment, it's just not knowing how to react or respond because it's just so out there compared to most people's day to day life. So you just get more and more concentrated within that industry. So you think that there's a collective and everyone has everyone's best interest, but that is not the case. Um, Oftentimes you see females that are running agencies or directors, and you're like, oh, that's going to be like someone who has my back because there's so few women of power in the industry, so she's going to get it. Oftentimes they use that against you, and like there's some of the worst experiences I've had have been with women in like higher positions. So yeah, I saw and unfortunately, like through experience, like a lot of bullshit. And through that, instead of taking it and wallowing or letting it affect me negatively, I'm like, nothing exists that I want or that would have worked for me in like a truly holistic, healthy way. So I fired my agencies that I was with, and they're like, well, what are you gonna do now? Like, you're never gonna make this kind of money without us. I was like, I'm gonna do it by myself. And they thought I was crazy. They said, absolutely, like she's gonna come running back within a couple months. I like the universe conspires for you. I met the perfect person at the perfect time. He now basically is the CEO of the agency and manages day-to-day operations. It took off. We have like top 2%, top 1% performers that we represent. The agency that I fired came back and was like, how about we acquire your agency and you can still run it? But I was like, fuck off. And the agency I was with before was stealing my content, repurposing it on other channels, selling it at a premium, and then redirecting my traffic to their channels. It was insane. It was
Wow.
absolutely insane. So yeah, it's led me to a position where I can kind of be this beacon for up and coming performers, and again, like just teach them not to do what I did, and hopefully leave the industry in a better place than when they started. Because unfortunately, there's no union, there's no how to. So you come in, a lot of these people are financially illiterate, so they end up losing money, and by the time that they're done, you've been ostracized by your community, sometimes your family, sometimes your friends. You don't have, like, you can never go be a teacher or go be a nurse or go be like work at Verizon. You're going to get fired, or if you even get hired, right? It's just like a permanent red A that you can't get off. So then what do you do, especially if you left with debt? So we're just trying to prevent that. We're in the process of starting a fund, so to teach our creators and our like performers how to invest. It's a very big vision that we're like just getting started with.
And I mean, it's so necessary,
Mhm.
and that it's taken, I'm sure some variations of this have kind of been around throughout the years, but to have an agency on a very large scale and to have that kind of vision seems like, and I'm not up close and personal with the industry, this portion of the industry very much, but it seems like it's still a relatively new thing to be gunning for. Like, hey, you're in this industry and I'd like to teach you about stocks and bonds. And, I'd like to teach you about how to manage credit card debt. I'd like to teach you about, investing in yourself and investing in your future. Here's an IRA, like, it's like, or like how to heal your relationships with your family and your family of origin, or how to build community so that if you do experience some level of being ostracized from the people that that you grew up with, the people that you have around you, know how to take care of yourself. Because I know that your work goes even beyond just like the industry stuff or the agency stuff, with regards to, because I snooped on you and I have your information. So I know that you went on and did other cool things, with your work. So not only do you have the agency now, but would you tell, um, our listeners a little bit about what you wound up doing with the, I don't know if you would say like the money that you saved along the way, or like just the trajectory of your life rather, post. So you did create the agency, but I think there was a gap in between of studies as well.
Yeah, so before the agency, I started on Twitch a little bit. I had like this like fake cooking show that was a ton of fun, and it did really well, but then I got pregnant and I could not maintain it. We were cooking like 3 or 4 times a week, and it was 4+ hours because we would prep and then we would cook and then we would have wine, and it was like this whole thing, and it was so much fun. And my husband, who is not like a producer by any means, is like behind the camera and he's chatting, and it was so much fun. So that did really well. And then I had my first son, and I wanted to get back into content creation, but I knew that the cooking stuff was not the right time. Again, like the investment was too much. So that's when I started the podcast. That has been doing amazing, and I genuinely love what I do. I get to it forces me to read, to learn, and to stay connected with adults, which is really fun and necessary. We're in the middle of a startup right now in the psychedelic space, which is
Mhm.
really interesting. So we have one of like the OG psychonauts it's kind of being founded like around, and the idea is to provide content specifically for entrepreneurs, but whoever like wants to consume it, sign up for a membership, go to retreats, that kind of thing. But it's basically to learn about spirituality, to kind of constantly be up leveling yourself, whether or not that's with using psychedelics. it's right now there's like this mass adoption happening in that space, and we're in the belief that like psychedelics are not for everyone. Like you need to have
Yeah.
a proper facilitator. Like the same psychedelic that works for one person might not be what you need, and it needs to a lot be more tailor made than what we're seeing. So a lot
Mm.
that's more of the ethos, and like principles around like this specific teacher and then that foundation. Um, my husband is always working on some tech thing because he's an investor, and I call him future boy. Like he loves exponential technologies, like that is his jam. So because of that, we're working on this AI tool for the agency, which is incredible. So eventually you'll be able to have a creator that's brand kind of lives forever. So you'll be able to recreate content, whether it's audio, video, photos, and no one will know the difference eventually. And then you can get into like the ethics of, do you have to say that it's AI generated or that it's not real or real? And my husband and I were talking about it, and he's like, well, like, would you feel bad if you had an AI responding to everybody, and they thought it was you? Or I was like, well, it's not me. It wouldn't be me, even if it, like it was
Right.
physically me typing. And he's like, what do you mean? I was like, well, Eva's not real. You know what I mean? Like Eva's my other
Right.
personality. Like Candice is real. They think they're talking to Eva anyway. So even if I were the one to be chatting with them, like I'm also pretending. You
Right.
know what I mean? So we're heading into like a really interesting future when it comes to like AI and chat GPT, and what does that mean for
Yeah.
content creators?
Yeah, that's super cool. See, I knew. I was like, there's more. I know that
Yeah.
there's more. I'm gonna snoop, because I host events, a handful of times a year.
Mhm.
And I joke, with my assistants and the people that I facilitate with, where I'm like, I give this, the people start arriving. Like I just hosted a retreat in New Orleans, and people are arriving and they're getting settled into their rooms and all these things. And I'm hanging out at the kitchen table, and I talk to my assistant. I'm like, how long do you think before we start talking about psychedelics? Like it's a sexual empowerment, feminine
Mhm.
embodiment retreat that has nothing to do with mushrooms. Like it has nothing to do with ayahuasca. It has nothing to do with any kind of like psychedelic. But it's usually within one of the first conversations that we have, round table style. Someone brings it up, someone shares an experience that they had, someone shares maybe a bad experience that they had, and then everyone's like, oh, and then it just starts to kind of take over. And I notice this more and more in my uh space, like people opening up to a sexual exploration. There's like some little switch that's flipped where they just generally, like, if I open my mind to this, I'm just going to leave my mind open. Because it's like, if I open my mind to like kinky things and tantra things and vulnerable things that have to do with sex and my sexuality and all of those things, and healing at large, it's like, oh, well, I guess I'll be curious about that thing too. So it never really surprises me when someone who's interested in sex and personal development is like, and also some of the psychedelic stuff too. And the AI is a very interesting question, like, does it really matter? I don't know. Depends on how you look at it, which is fascinating because I've got, living in Austin, we've got some people, we've got some like uber nerds in lots of different categories here. And I feel like I can hear, if I go to an event, like I was at a 4th of July event yesterday, and there's like several conversations that are happening about AI and all the cool things, and like what is happening in the world today. Like it's fascinating and terrifying and super cool.
Mhm. Yeah, I think it just comes down to discernment. So like you want to approach things with curiosity and have an open mind, but you don't want your mind so open that your brains fall out. Right? So like
Or your
prac
soul is fragmented into the ether and you can't figure out how to put it back together.
right, someone that like never comes back down.
Right,
So
right,
that's not functional. That's not
right.
going to serve you for your best purpose here right now.
Yeah.
So just discerning. So be curious, approach it with healthy skepticism, but curiosity, and then discern. Is this for me? Is this not for me? Is this for me? Is this not for me? And if it's not for you, that's fine. It doesn't need to be met with judgment or opposition or force or coercion or whatever it is. So I think that's what I bring out in a lot of people, is because my life and my trajectory has not been for them, that they feel like they have to like openly oppose it. And you
Hmm.
can say it's not for you 100%, but that doesn't mean that we're at odds. That doesn't mean that I'm
Right.
someone to fight over it, right? It's so again just discerning without judgment.
Mm. So I'm gonna kind of double back on what I thought we might end our convo on, because I'm actually very curious about your marriage and your relationship and how that came to be, and then of course the kids along the way too. But while we're on the agency and some of the other work that you do, I'll just bring up the content conversation, because one of the parts of our business is that we do sex education for other coaches and facilitators so that they can be a more integrated coach and a more integrated healer, facilitator, whatever they do. And it was funny because we most recently got started with one of our groups. It's got, 21 either brand new coaches, or they are a coach in some regard and they're just wanting to up their sex education and sex facilitation, those kinds of things. And one of the first things that they started asking is, how do we prevent ourselves from getting banned? Or how do we prevent shadow banning? What do we do if accounts are disabled and all those things? And I was like, we'll talk about it on the next call, which is in 2 weeks. And literally the next day my account was down. I was like, fuck. And so they're all terrified, but it's a little bit different, I mean, it hurts regardless of whenever it happens, whether you've got several 100,000 followers or you've got, that initial 1,200 followers that you're like painstakingly working for, just trying to get the snowball effect. And I think about my Instagram account, and even though it's only 4 years old, I'm like, there's hours of my time that is poured onto that platform. And if it just doesn't come back, it's heartbreaking. There's like personal stories, and like a lot of my life over the last 4 years work is there. It's showcased there. And so it's not just like, oh, your social media where you keep in touch with like your Aunt Frida and your Uncle Joe. And, like, it's not like social to me like that. It's my business, but it's also like my diary in a lot of ways for me anyway. I know for other creators and other people who own businesses and leverage social media in that regard, it's maybe not as personal, but for me, it's like my heart is poured out and all over that thing. And if it just goes away, it affects me maybe differently than it might affect other people. And I know that my students and people who are curious about what we do and getting into what we do, that's like a major question mark. So you mentioned that it's something that you work on in your agency and with some of your content creators. So how do you protect it? What does that look like?
So we are in an era of like digital sharecropping. So we build and build and build, and then you can wake up and all of a sudden what you thought was yours is just gone. And it's because we're building on platforms where you don't own your information, right? You just don't own it. I think it's really important to make sure that you're diversified across all the platforms. I think right now with Elon buying Twitter, it was one of the best things for creators because he's not necessarily a free speech absolutist, which he's kind of shown, which people were thinking he was going to be, but it's still much more lenient and much more free than pretty much any other platform. So Twitter is a great place to build. Substack is a great place to build, especially if you are doing entries. So you could be just copying and pasting and building a Substack. And then they do have a membership model, so you can be charging there as well. Community SMS is wonderful. So 90% of people will open up a text versus the old school email newsletter. So that's a really cool way to get your content across and like keep in touch with the community. Things like a Discord channel. Zion is a really cool decentralized social platform that some people are using. I've had the founder on my podcast
Yeah,
talk
Justin's
about.
here in
Oh
Austin.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. So
Resvani.
talk about their mission. Minds is an amazing platform. Bill is incredible. He's in the process of trying to figure out how to decentralize it completely. I don't know when they'll get there, but they're pretty free speech absolutist. And if you want to know if a site is or not, ask if they allow adult content, right? Because that is protected under the First Amendment. Whether or not people agree with that is like another conversation, but it is. So like they allow 18 plus accounts on there. It's just a different type of account. Twitter is obviously the same. Adult content is there. But if you look at something like a Locals, for example, they pretend that they're free speech absolutist, but you cannot have adult content. So the problem with that is it's like once you start saying, oh, well, I'm about like censorship free or unfiltered, expression except for this. Well, it's a matter of time until you start like picking all of the things that you don't like, and then you eventually now have a censored platform just like YouTube. So, yeah, it's like finding platforms with missions that align with that, and then just like not investing entirely on one account. And then you have to unfortunately just rebuild. I know some people that have had countless Instagram accounts, and this one girl, she is more flagged than I think anybody in the adult space. She puts up an account and under her bio it was said, "Me exists. Instagram, you have violated our terms." And that's truly what it is for her. And it's so unfortunate because it's not like she's posting anything that is against the terms of service. Obviously, there's filters if you want to post adult content on platforms like Twitter. And it comes down to parenting. It is not big tech's job to watch your child. It is your job. Put the filters on the devices. Have the conversations of what they should and shouldn't be consuming, right? Like build a kid that is like resilient and not going to go along with the crowd, and it's going to say, hey, like this is not okay for me to watch, and like bring that attention to an adult. But that's a whole other thing. But yeah, I
Mm.
think it comes down to supporting platforms that don't believe in censorship.
Yeah, and that's that's tough. That's at least that's been tough for me slash us, especially since like beginning, I did a lot of long form writing, a lot of long form like blog reposting from like a original blog, and I posted on Facebook back when Facebook was kind of cool, and Facebook lives were all the rage.
Mhm.
And then we started our Facebook community and our group and all of that, and like that's been flagged a number of times, and like to me, I'm like I wouldn't say I'm wholesome by any account, but
Mhm.
so non-threatening, so basic conversation, like it's not edge. I don't know if I would say like it's really edge pushing. It's like it's just simply education. It's information, and it's not solicitation on any level.
Mhm.
Though we have programs for singles and couples and people that want to you know learn more of what's available in their sexual, as far as what's available in their sexual expression. And so in some ways, does that kind of fit under sexual solicitation? Because you can pay for this course that has no nudity in it and is only slides, PowerPoint slides and free and resources as a part of it. And maybe my face talking, but nothing like too crazy. You know what I mean? And that's coming down, which is just so sad to me. But I want to reach the normal everyday Joe, so to speak,
Mhm.
because I feel like our content is very much a bridge. And we're friends with all kinds of different content creators, and I really love being a bridge to opening people up so that, okay, if they want to go express and explore their kinky side, here's the person that we love as far as kink education. And, if they want to go deeper into any kind of the sexual healing modalities, here's the people we like for that. We love to bridge. And so our people are often on you know, these platforms. And so I don't know what that like the transition would look like to go to something. I don't know. I don't think you mentioned Mighty Networks. I don't know if I would imagine they're not completely censorship free. I'm not sure, but I do know a few creators that are on there. Our Patreon, I know like that's not censorship free either. But what how do I meet what my typical audience is? How do I meet them and then go, hey, completely change how you navigate on your phone or on your computer and come to this, create an account over here that you're not familiar with. Like how do we get them to go from there to there and make that worth it? I mean, to us, the one thing that I feel like we've done right, I mean, we've done lots of things right for sure. But one thing that we have done is that we've developed our, I don't know, maybe this was like maybe 2 or 3 years in. I was like, we really need to focus on this email list. So at least we've got the email list. You know what I mean? But that's, I know that there's a lot of content creators, and I have a number of people who are coaching on in some regard that do follow our show too, that are very curious about the thing that I just asked you. It's like, how do you like get them to go from there to there and stick around and maybe even still buy your things?
It's really hard. The conversion rates for everyone are abysmally low, but I think
Mm,
you have to keep hammering it in, right? It's just like the more that they're
totally.
exposed to the thing, eventually they're going to swipe up or click the link. But as far as like again, accounts being censored. It's you have to be everywhere and then just be ready to rebuild at any moment, and then just make sure that you are on some of the decentralized platforms. Not everyone wants to go on Minds because they're like, it's another fucking app I don't want to do. And I totally get that. Sometimes if you do giveaways and like you incentivize that way, that could be helpful. But yeah, it's really tricky. Right now, I would say Twitter. And they're trying to move into a place where, so you know how Google is like organizing the world's information and Instagram is like organizing all of your photos or capturing your memories or whatever their slogan was. So I think Twitter is trying to go into the space of the world's conversations, and they want to be a place where everyone is conversing there. So they're going to start optimizing for video. They have the spaces, which people really love because then you're kind of like, it's almost like a live podcast. You're like, what's going to happen next? It's just a little bit more
Cool.
edgy. So I would definitely focus on Twitter. And most
Sure.
people, I feel like if you have the other socials, you probably are on Twitter as well. And the
Yeah.
good thing with Minds specifically is that it integrates with Twitter. So you don't have to post on there. It just automatically bumps it to your Minds account, and it's no extra work for you. So if you do get some people
Okay.
to switch over, do that. But yeah, it's just repetition. I mean, and the thing that's kind of hard to swallow, especially if you have an account that has a lot of followers or you put a lot of time into, it's like sometimes your audience isn't going to be the audience that goes to the next thing. So you have
Yeah.
to just focus on catching new people. So not necessarily tapping into your well, because I have my Eva account that has almost 3 million followers. Getting most of them to go to something else is really hard because they're there for Eva, right? And like they have this very fixed mindset as to like what kind of content they want from me. So
Sure.
you can't really force people except just constantly exposing them. And I do. My reels are almost all podcast thing. And some people, like, there's a lot of people that are like, shut up and take off your shirt. Well, that's fine. I'm glad that's you're entitled to that opinion, but I'm going to keep posting this and eventually get more and more of you down. So just wear them down.
Totally. Okay. There you go.
Wear them
Diversify
down.
and wear them down. You know, I heard a recent stat, and I'm gonna totally say it wrong, but that out of all of the accounts that are on Twitter, what is it, like 10% are actively posting?
Oh, wow. Really?
Yeah, I don't know. It's either 10 or 30.
Whoa. But still a lot lower than you would
Oh
imagine.
yeah. Yeah, that's kind of like there's, and I don't know this actual stat either, but out of all of the podcasts that are out in the world, there's only a very small percentage that are consistently posting, you know? And so it's pretty
Mhm.
easy to get listened to at this point. Like it's pretty easy to get, you know, if you're active on Twitter, it's seemingly relatively easy if you're posting really high quality, good content, whatever high quality is for Twitter, but good content, then it in theory should get seen.
Right, and just like be calculated, engage with big accounts that you like, engage with smaller accounts that they follow. That's been when I was up and coming and trying to get in contact with certain people, I would see, let's say your moonshot is Taylor Swift. You're like, I'm not going to get Taylor Swift right away, but let's see who Taylor follows. And you go through who she follows. Find someone that you're interested in with a low following, like relatively low, maybe as low as you can possibly get, and reach out to that person. And then slowly you'll start building those connections. And it's not in this like Machiavellian, dark, triad kind of way. It's just like, no, lead with curiosity, but also be a little bit calculated, because you
Yeah.
have to prove yourself to be able to get where you want to go. Like a lot of people aren't just going to have the door open for you. They're like, who are you to take an hour of my time or whatever it is that you're trying to do? So,
Sure.
yeah, it's just be calculated, but you could definitely grow on Twitter. I think a lot of the bad press is probably for other purposes as well, because I feel like a lot of the media has it out for Twitter and Elon, and like that
Hmm.
acquisition was not taken it wasn't taken well with a lot of people, because there is a narrative and people don't
Yeah,
like free form discussion. So I don't know.
totally.
It's one of my favorite platforms.
Yeah. Well, like I said, we live in Austin, so
Yeah.
everybody loved it here.
Yeah.
This is a very freedom focused kind of town, even though it's a little bit of a blue dot in a giant red sea state, but it's you know, it was like the talk, everybody talking about
You
it. But
have to be though. If you're in
yeah,
creation at all, you have to be like for freedom of
yeah,
expression, because
yeah,
otherwise you have no voice. Like the minute that
totally,
happens, it's gone. Like all of your life is
totally.
gone. Creativity is gone.
Absolutely. So thank you for all of this. I definitely feel inspired in some ways, especially to hear from someone who has accounts that are significantly larger than mine, and even some of the people that we work with that are maybe even just getting started. And sometimes there's that feeling of like, why get started if it's going to come down? But this work, just sex education, I'm using that as a blanket term, because whether they're coming to adult content creators, like they're getting something, maybe not necessarily education, but also maybe like they're getting something from this industry. And you know they're feeling a lot of times like, why get started if it's all going to come down? And the work is so impactful, important,
Mm.
powerful, no matter what, like niche within the niche that people are interacting with. And it'd be really sad if it all just went away. You know what
Well,
I
I feel
mean?
like unfortunately too is you have to self-censor to some extent
Oh
to
yeah.
kind of like get through the terms of service. So instead of, putting like sex, like use emojis or use some kind of code that someone is going to get, right? And the point is still gotten across without, I don't know, using anything that they see as explicit. And
Sure.
then probably like using education, I would imagine helps. But like coming
Yeah.
up with different, I don't know, like subliminal subliminal messaging a little bit.
I know it's rough. And up to this point, I have refused to do it. And that's probably factoring into the fact that, our accounts come down 3 times in the last however many years. Um, because it irks me. I don't want to say segs. I want to say sex. It's sex. I don't
Yeah,
want to say orgasm with a number 0 as the O, and like a space between the G and the A and the whatever. Like I just want to say orgasm. Like, what's wrong with
yeah.
saying orgasm? And the community guidelines. That's what they said. That you've broken community, violated community guidelines for sexual solicitation. Like, what the fuck? So anyway, we can move on from chatting about this, because it's like it's a thing, and there's not I don't want to say like there's nothing we can do about it, because there are things that you were just saying, the diversification and the self-censorship and all those things. And like the work is still desirable, there's still people looking for it, and it's worth it every time we've had to like jump through the hoops
Mhm.
and figure out how to get accounts back, or it's just been worth it up to this point. And so, yeah, I'll have a conversation. I think like when I get off of this and I find my husband, who's just been walking circles around our pool with our pit bull. I've been watching him through the window here, which everyone who's listening will not be surprised that Jordan's in the pool with Biggie. But I'll have a conversation with him after and be like, okay, what do you think it could look like for us to diversify, to have us like have some level of security here, because it does feel very volatile. I mean, what we do as an entrepreneur, it feels very volatile anyway. And so
Mhm.
then to add our main revenue source of like where we get leads and where we sell and all of that is also at risk, beyond like us showing up and doing the work that we've agreed to do in the world. Like it's several layers of volatility, which causes a lot of stress. And this is kind of like an interesting segue into what I want to chat with you maybe last about is, this is a conversation that I have with my husband, because we both work for the brand and the company that I created, 6.5 years ago or so. He was this biohacking bro. And then eventually COVID hit, and his entire section of the company that he worked for got let go, like unexpectedly. And
Mm.
and so, and he was in men's coaching, and he was in health, fitness, nutrition, and personal development already. And so he was like, what am I going to do? I let him kind of like bump into things and try things on for like a cool 6 months or so. And then I was like, hey, how about you just join me? Like officially join me. And so we have Sex and Love Co. now, and we run it together. And I know that you in a lot of ways work with your husband
Mhm.
and in this world. And so I'm so curious what y'all's relationship is like and how it came to be. So like my husband, it's very different. Like he sees me go into a group, and then I start talking about all these sexual things, and here's your sexual smorgasbord, everyone, and here's how to get those things. And then after him be like, I didn't even know you knew that. Why don't we do that? you know So like I have like a whole different kind of thing, the way that he looks at me, and the with the work, with regards to the work that we do, that I imagine is very different to you guys. but I'm just so curious how that support looks and how you navigate business together, and family together. And then I have underlined in my notes here anti-fragile marriage. And so since we're like a year and a half in to our marriage, I'm like, anything that's like, how do we make it bulletproof and anti-fragile and, all of that, I'm like down for the codes.
All the things. I
Yeah.
think our our story, I feel like, would be the most hysterical and dramatic drom com ever. So like he was there from the beginning. Pretty much as soon as I started webcamming is when I met him. And everyone is cool when it's, you by yourself, and everyone's cool when it's just a magazine. Most people are cool if it's just you with other women. Where it gets complicated is when you start having like the boy girl scenes. And then that was really tricky to navigate. And I think what got us through it was we both had this end goal of winding up together. We both were like, you're my person. So how do we figure this out? There's um there's this word called compersion, and the idea is to feel joy and pleasure for someone else's joy and pleasure. And you can see your partner across the room at a cocktail party, and they're talking to a group of people, and instead of getting jealous or feeling left out or whatever it is, you can just be happy for them. I'm happy. He or she looks like they're having a great time, and I don't need to be there for to appreciate or value that. So that's kind of how he describes his journey throughout my career, is having that compersion and then that perspective. And also this idea where neither of us believe love is about control or ownership. I think those things are in opposition to love. So if you're trying to put somebody into a cage and it's like, you're my little bird and you'll never fly, well, that's horrible. And then what is that? That's not love. That's a prison, and it's all manufactured because we're not testing it against anything. Literally love based purely on conditions. I only love you so long as you do what I want or behave in a way that I approve of, or you don't hurt my feelings, or you don't evoke jealousy, right? There's all of these conditions that we're putting onto that love. And to me, it's nothing, that's not what I wanted. I had no interest in that. And I don't think that he did either. So he didn't want to put like our relationship in a position where he was like, if you do this thing, I'm out, right? There was no ultimatum. He did say, I have no idea how I'm going to respond. I've never been in this situation. I don't know if it's for me. I don't know if we'll make it out on the other side. And I so appreciated that honesty. And I was the same way. I had no idea what was going to happen. I just kind of had this maybe naive faith that we were going to figure it out. And I mean, it did work out. It was a ton of arguments, but through that through those arguments and those tears and like the shouting and when it happened and having to confront your jealousy and say, well, is this for me? Is this mine? Why do I have it? Is it really about the other person having sex, or for other people on like a more soft scale, like having a conversation out at the bar without me? Like, is that really the thing I'm mad at? Or am I terrified I'm going to be alone? Am I terrified I'm going to lose this person? And I'm terrified that my identity is wrapped up in this person? Like all of these other bigger things that are really the root of that jealousy that we feel. And it's never about the thing. So a lot of radical honesty around that, like those topics, and allowing a trusting space to where if he came to me in jealousy and anger, whatever, in sadness, that I wasn't gonna fight back, and I was gonna have a space where he could be vulnerable with me and vice versa. So I think that's also something really important to consider too, because it's like we want quote honesty from somebody, but if they do something that they know is going to upset us, we bring all hell. And then they're like, well, I'm not going to do that again because last time I told her I did this thing, she lost her shit, and I don't want to deal with that. So then there's avoidance. So if you want honesty, if you truly want honesty, you have to allow a space to where you can let that person come to you, and you both have that ultimate goal of like healing and coming back together and reconnecting. So I think sometimes it's like we want to hold on to that thing that I don't know, whether it was like infidelity or whether it was gambling or whether it was like a white lie or whether he came home 2 hours late, whatever it is, we hold on to it. And then the next argument, we throw it back at them. And so we've never truly forgiven them. And then we're like kind of having the relationship rot from within because we're so committed to holding on to that, like that, what's the word I'm looking for? Um, mm, like not indiscretion. Sorry, I'm totally blanking. But whatever it is that they did, we're holding on
Sure.
to that with like such commitment that we are like jeopardizing the relationship for that. So when it comes to anti-fragile relationship, the idea is that you can have something that's strong or you can have something that literally takes on the strength of the opposition. So we are fortified through that fire. Like we're forged through that fire, and it's not something that's going to weaken the marriage but actually enhance it. Sorry, I have a tickle.
That's all right. That's all right. Yeah. I mean, I think indiscretion was probably I think that landed the plane also, or like infraction or whatever, is that, and people do collect all those things. They
Hmm.
collect them. And then it's like, okay, well, now here are all the reasons why I can't trust you, or I can't be vulnerable with you, or I have to control things. And they continuously try to, reinforce that bias that like you are this and I am that, whatever those things are. And then, and like the anti-fragile at the end where you're like, those are the things that fortify the relationship. I totally agree and believe that as well. And it takes a special kind of work, to
Hmm.
get to a place where it's like, oh, we are approaching the fire. We are in the fire. This is going to wind up being good for us.
Hmm.
Like most people are just terrified. They're like, do anything to avoid coming close to the fire. And then what that winds up creating is a lot of resentment and
Hmm.
repression. And because people are built to change and I say to change, they're built to evolve and to grow and to learn and to, become different iterations of themselves. And some people are more, oriented towards that, where they're like actively seeking that. And then some people I've learned throughout life where I'm like, oh, you're really perfectly happy and content, like truly happy and content, just having your life be like this.
Hmm.
And usually they're partnered with someone who's the opposite. That's like, I want to grow. Let's, do new things. Um, let's, kill the egos and see what happens, and, take this mind altering substance. Um, and so, yeah, like for my husband and I, we look at those things where we're like, oh fuck, okay, well, we have tools. And it's taken years and years of being committed, to not living an ordinary, resentful, repressed kind of life, um, in order to accumulate those tools to where when we look at, we're going into some of the tough stuff, we're going into hard things, where we look at it as we know that we will be better on the other side. And that can be so hard for so many people if they're like, but I'm already like so sleep deprived and momming and doing this, and I've got a job and I've all this stuff. And now it's also time for us to have like a relationship, like a death cycle, like in our relationships and all of that, like that too. And I try to remind myself over and over again, especially as Jordan and I are going through like the initial, like, oh fuck, we're gonna have a baby.
Hmm.
And like all these things are gonna have to change. And like, how do we feel about this? And the first one is like, I thought I was gonna be really excited about having a pregnant body. I thought I did like a lot of work on this, to
Yeah.
where I'm like, I want this. I've waited for this. We're excited. We experienced pregnancy loss last year. So I'm like, I'm going to look at every single thing and I'm going to be grateful for it. I'm going to be so grateful. And now it's happening. And I'm like, fuck. Like I thought I chose this route to think about this and feel about this. And now this is actually what's playing out. And so I'd say, like, for Jordan and I, we're even in that now, where I'm like, man, we're just maybe a couple more conversations before we reach peace, before we reach harmony, before we reach like, we're really deeply connected. But it's going to come after a little season here of like a lot of tears and a lot of, oh shit, and a lot of like question marks and like, where is this going? And that's temporary.
Hmm.
And I'm sure you've learned that too. Like when it gets hard and you're like, what the fuck are we doing here? Like it's temporary,
Hmm.
and something even better is going to wind up happening on the other side of it.
Yeah, it's tough. You have to decide how delicate you want your union to be, right? Is it as fragile as he forgets to take out the trash for 3 weeks in a row, and then all of a sudden he's a piece of shit husband, he's lazy. We do this castrating, right? Like this emotional castrating that we do. So for me, it's so my husband has like really bad ADD, like really bad ADD. And it shows up with him zoning out a lot. It shows up with him maybe not seeing my needs right away, or like maybe areas where I really need help. I'm like falling short with laundry, whatever it is, right? Like he can get tunnel vision very easily. And it took a lot of work on my end to always assume the best out of him. Like
Mm-hmm.
always give him the benefit of the doubt. Like I married an incredible man who loves me and loves my kids, and like he is owed that. Like indefinitely. Not like he gets 10 benefits of the doubt and then all of a sudden I'm going to go and castrate him right away because he didn't do X, Y, or Z. It's like, no,
Right.
that's the love of my life and I'm always going to give him the benefit of the doubt. And when I find myself belittling him in my head or criticizing him or blaming him, I have to quickly separate myself from that thought. That's not me. That's not mine. That's my habit. That's my loop that I have been caught in for however many years because of whatever reasons. I'm going to choose that I don't want that to be my inner dialogue. And I'm like, thank you, but no thank you, and push it aside and then go back to that other perspective. And most of the time, if you approach a man and you're like, I'm sure you had a good reason for this. What was it? And he'll give you some like something you never would have seen because we're just so fundamentally different. The way we see
Yeah.
everything is so fundamentally different. You're like, okay, that actually kind of makes sense from where you're coming from. And you don't have to approach it with hostility or judgment or like let it ruin your fucking day, right? Like, so just remember that you chose that person. They chose you. You both fucking love each other. And at the end of the day, no matter how hard it gets, you're going to figure it out. So not to be mistaken with your feelings or your thoughts, because I think that's also really tricky. So if we're in this place where we're emotional and again like all you see is the lows, you have to know that that's where you're at. So you have to kind of do that pattern interrupt to be able to get a higher perspective and to see the gratitude. Otherwise, you're getting like a very distorted version of your reality. Does
Yeah.
that make sense?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And it's hard sometimes like to do the zoom out and to
Mm-hmm.
make
Totally.
and it takes conscious effort to
Yeah.
shift from I really want to believe that if you didn't take the trash out this week, I like
Mm-hmm.
everything in me wants to believe that it's because you don't give a fuck about me. You don't, you're not attracted to me anymore. You don't love this family. You don't want to be in this relationship. Like everything in me wants to make you a piece of shit
Right.
because you didn't do this thing. When every good part of me, like higher self part of me, whatever you want to call it, is like, no, he's just forgotten he's a human and I chose him and I love him and we just need to have a conversation and this is my shit, you
Mm-hmm.
know? And so and it can be tough, like I mean, and I have my moments and I know that other people who are listening to the show have their moments too where it's like, man, I just like get in it and I can't get out of it. And I'm just like, wow, I am really wallowing in self pity here. So, like, let me just go in my, in the room that I'm recording in is my office slash is also kind of like a place where I read and I come and meditate and I do all these things. And I'm like, let me just go in my room and just like have a little pity party for myself and like process this out for myself so that I don't give it to the person that I love. Because if I give it to him, like my whole life is ruining, is like getting is in ruins around me,
Mm-hmm.
and it's something that I'm playing an active role in. And it doesn't mean don't mention, hey, can you take the trash out? Like it doesn't mean like I gotta go process it for myself and then just ignore whatever's either happening or not happening.
Mm-hmm.
It's a more nuanced conversation than that. But it just brings up the, if you want to have like an anti-fragile marriage, you need to be willing to take 100% responsibility for the role that you play and everything that you're doing,
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and
because
that's tough.
and how easy it sounds ridiculous, but I think probably most listeners, including myself, we've been there where something so ridiculous like a trash can overflowing all of a sudden leads to he doesn't love me, I'm not desirable.
Yeah.
If he loved me, he wouldn't be ignoring the chores around the house. He wouldn't be leaving it up to me. It's like that doesn't even make logical sense,
No.
right? To go from one point to another. So like you kind of have to laugh at it and just acknowledge how ridiculous sometimes it can be and then see how you can figure out how do you disperse the duties around the house or the
Yeah.
duties around the business in a way that becomes more automatic. And then once you have that conversation, it becomes a habit. You don't have to have it anymore, but it's just it's like divvying out those jobs, which is why it's important to be like, this is your role, this is my role. Like he feeds the dogs, that's not my jam, that's what he does. So we don't have to have that conversation. Or if it's not out, if he forgot, I'll just like send him a text or give him a quick reminder, like, hey, did you do XYZ? I don't have to like attack him and you're lazy and so forgetful and look at your ADD. That's not helping
Yeah.
anyone.
Yeah.
And that's not how you talk to someone you love.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Behavior change doesn't happen like true behavior change, authentic behavior change doesn't happen if you just lay on shame really thick. You know,
No.
and just like shame you into submission. I don't know. That could be really I mean, that sounds like a really nice kinky scene, but it doesn't work in like everyday people life.
Mm-mm.
Candice, thank you. This conversation was like a lot of different things, which I imagine is a lot like your personality, is not just this one component. It's not just mom, it's not just wife, it's not just, agency owner, adult performer, whatever it is. It's multifaceted,
Mm.
and so I appreciate having you and your work and this story on the show. And I'm so grateful. Like, there's so many different categories that we had conversations in. Lots of different people in our audience would really appreciate, they might like really resonate and be into the first portion or the middle portion or the last portion here. But either way, I definitely enjoyed getting to know you and having you on the show. Thank you so much. And if people want to hang out with you even beyond this show, I think they can listen to you more. Your show's called Chatting with Candice.
Yes.
Yes. So they can find you there, or where else would you like for them to maybe get connected with you?
All of my socials are Candice Horbacz, so you can just find me there. I'm probably the most active on Twitter, Instagram. Those are where I kind of hang out. But thank you so much. This was amazing. You're a great host, and I hope that your listeners got something beneficial and fun out of the conversation.
Yes, ma'am. I appreciate you.